I had dealt with plenty of Karen nonsense since moving into this neighborhood, but this time, she took things way too far. Welcome to Logan's Stories. Before we begin, drop a like on the video and subscribe so we can continue making videos like this one. It all started with my garden hose. One afternoon, I was outside watering my lawn when I noticed Karen, the self-appointed dictator of our HOA, glaring at me from across the street. She was standing on her porch, arms crossed, shaking her head like I had just committed some unspeakable crime. I sighed. Here we go again. Sure enough, moments later she stomped over, her heels clicking against the pavement with an urgency that suggested she thought she was on official business. "Excuse me," she barked, pointing an accusing finger at my hose. "That is a clear violation of HOA water usage restrictions." I stared at her, barely able to process what I was hearing. "What? Karen, I'm just watering my lawn." She huffed. "Exactly. Do you even know how much water you're wasting? We have regulations to prevent people like you from ruining our community's water supply. It's all in the HOA handbook." I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, it rained yesterday. My wasteful watering isn't hurting anyone." "That's not the point," she snapped. "You don't get to pick and choose which rules to follow." I sighed, knowing full well that arguing with Karen was like arguing with a brick wall. "Look, unless you have an actual reason beyond because I said so, I'm going to keep watering my lawn." Her face twitched. "Oh, you'll regret this," she spat before storming back across the street. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning I turned on my shower, expecting a nice, warm start to my day. Nothing, not a single drop of water came out. I tried the sink. Dry. I checked the outside hose. Bone dry. Panic set in. Had there been a pipe burst, a citywide water shut-off? What was going on? And then I glanced outside and saw Karen standing in her front yard, smirking. My stomach dropped. I stormed outside, already knowing she was behind this. "Karen, what the hell did you do?" She beamed like she had just won a major victory. "Oh, I just taught you a lesson. Since you clearly don't understand responsible water usage, I took the liberty of shutting it off for you." I blinked, stunned. "You? What?" She crossed her arms. "Simple. The HOA has access to the neighborhood's water controls for emergency situations. I called in a maintenance request and had them cut off your supply. Now, you'll think twice before wasting resources." My hands clenched into fists. "Karen, that's illegal. You can't just shut off someone's water because you don't like how they use it." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, relax, it's temporary. Maybe next time you'll follow the rules like everyone else." I took a deep breath, trying not to completely lose it. "Karen, you just messed with city property. You have no idea what you've done." She laughed. "Oh, please. What's the worst that could happen?" At that exact moment I heard a loud metallic groan coming from her house. Karen frowned. "What was that?" And then bang! A loud burst erupted from inside Karen's home, followed by the unmistakable sound of rushing water. Karen's smug grin vanished. She turned toward her house just in time to see water pouring out from underneath her front door. Her house was flooding, and it was all her fault. Before I could even fully process what was happening, Karen let out an ear-piercing shriek and bolted toward her front door, yanking it open. A wall of water surged out, drenching her from head to toe as she staggered backward, gasping like a fish. Inside, I could see absolute chaos unfolding. Water was gushing from the ceiling, spraying from her kitchen sink and bubbling up through the floor vents. It looked like her house had turned into a broken aquarium. Karen flailed, slipping on the wet pavement. "No! No! What's happening?" I folded my arms, watching the disaster unfold. "Huh. Looks like cutting off someone's water supply can cause some serious pressure buildup." She spun around, her face red with fury and panic. "This is your fault! You sabotaged me!" I let out a laugh. "Karen, I haven't touched anything. You did this all by yourself." Just then, a neighbor ran over, eyes wide. "Oh my God, Karen! Your basement's flooding. I can see water pouring out of your vents." Karen's face twisted in horror. "My new hardwood floors," I smirked. "Yikes. Maybe next time, don't mess with someone else's water supply." As Karen stood there, soaked, humiliated, and screaming into the sky, I pulled out my phone. Time to call the city. Karen had no idea the trouble she was really in. Karen stood frozen, watching in horror as water gushed out of her house like a broken dam. Her expensive curtains were soaked, furniture was floating, and her freshly installed hardwood floors ruined beyond repair. I didn't even try to hold back my smirk. Well, Karen, it looks like you really taught someone a lesson. Unfortunately, that someone was yourself. She spun to face me, her soaked hair plastered to her forehead. You did this! You sabotaged my house! I scoffed. Oh yeah, Karen, I totally snuck into your home, rewired your plumbing, and orchestrated a perfect disaster, all because you shut off my water. She wasn't listening. Instead, she stomped toward her front door, wading through ankle-deep water. Every step sent more ripples through her ruined living room, causing items to shift and knock against each other like an eerie, slow-motion wreck. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air. Karen froze. 2 city utility trucks pulled up, followed closely by a municipal inspector and a water department official. The second they stepped out, their jaws dropped at the sight of Karen's self-inflicted catastrophe. What the hell happened here? One of the officials muttered as he surveyed the scene. I casually stepped forward, arms crossed. Oh, it's simple, really. Karen here decided to shut off my water supply without authorization. Seems like she didn't realize her house was on the same water main. The inspector's face turned to pure disbelief. Wait, you shut off someone else's water? Without city approval? Karen, still drenched and sputtering, forced out a nervous laugh. Oh, come on. It was just a tiny adjustment. It's not like I was trying to hurt anyone. The water department official shot her a deadpan stare. Ma'am, tampering with municipal water lines is a serious violation. You're looking at massive fines and possible criminal charges. Karen's smug arrogance shattered. WWHHA? Criminal charges? She shrieked. You can't be serious. It was a misunderstanding. I was only enforcing HOA rules. The inspector sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Lady, HOA rules don't override city laws. You don't have the authority to touch anything. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but before she could spew more nonsense, the official pulled out a violation notice and started writing. This is going on record. The city will be conducting a full inspection of your property, damage, and assessing any further violations. You will be personally responsible for all repairs and legal consequences. Karen let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a sob and a growl. You can't do this to me. I'm the head of the HOA. I chuckled. Yeah, Karen? Well, looks like the city doesn't care. A few neighbors had gathered, whispering amongst themselves. Mr. Jenkins from 2 houses down whistled. Wow, karma works fast around here. Karen turned on the official, hands flailing. Listen, this is all a misunderstanding. I was only trying to help. The official didn't even blink. By illegally shutting off someone's water? That's not help, ma'am. That's a crime. She looked back at her ruined house, then at the growing crowd of amused neighbors. Her face was bright red, and I could tell, for the first time ever, Karen realized she wasn't getting out of this. But the best part? This wasn't over yet. Karen stood there, her face a mixture of rage, humiliation, and sheer panic, as water continued to pour from her ruined home. The city officials, unimpressed with her attempts to play the victim, had already begun writing up violation notices, documenting everything from the property damage to the unauthorized water tampering. Meanwhile, the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered to watch were barely containing their amusement. I leaned against my porch railing, watching the scene unfold with the satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed karma working at lightning speed. So, Karen, how's that lesson working out for you? I called out. Learn anything new about not messing with someone else's utilities? She turned on me, soaked, disheveled, and fuming. You think this is funny? My house is destroyed. I'm gonna sue you. I laughed outright. Sue me? For what? For something you did? Karen, you literally brought this on yourself. I didn't touch your water supply, you did. And now, you're facing the consequences. Karen splashed forward, her soggy shoes sloshing through the ankle-deep water pooling in her driveway. No, this is your fault. You probably messed with the plumbing. You set me up. The city inspector, who had been reviewing the main waterline shutoff records, cleared his throat loudly. Actually, no, he didn't. Our system logs show the shutoff request came directly from you, Karen. We have it on file. You made an unauthorized call, claiming to be acting under HOA authority to disconnect service to a neighboring home. That's fraud, tampering with city property, and unlawful interference with a public utility. Karen's face drained of color. No, I was just trying to enforce regulations. The water department official held up a hand, cutting her off. Ma'am, that's not how it works. The HOA has no jurisdiction over municipal water control. You tampered with something you didn't understand, and now you're responsible for every single dollar of damage. Karen's breath hitched. How much? The official flipped through his paperwork before reading the preliminary estimate aloud. Between the structural damage, plumbing repairs, and violation fines, you're looking at around $50,000 in damages and legal fees. And that's a conservative estimate. The gasp Karen let out was so dramatic I thought she was going to faint on the spot. 50,000? One of the neighbors let out a low whistle. Dang, hope you've got good insurance. Karen whipped around to glare at him, her fists trembling. You think this is funny? This is my life we're talking about. The city inspector sighed, rubbing his temples like he had dealt with far too many Karens in his career. Ma'am, this is exactly why we don't allow unqualified individuals to interfere with municipal systems. Actions have consequences. The paperwork is already being filed. You'll be notified of your court hearings soon. Karen's eyes bulged. Yes, court, the official repeated. Tampering with a city utility isn't just a fine, it's a criminal offense. You'll need to appear before a judge. I'd strongly suggest you get a lawyer. At that, Karen actually staggered, gripping the side of her waterlogged car for balance. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. And honestly, I loved every second of it. She turned back to me, her expression shifting to something pathetically desperate. You have to help me. Talk to them. Tell them this was all a misunderstanding. You don't want to see your neighbor ruined, do you? I let out a slow, exaggerated, pretending to consider it. Karen, let me think. You shut off my water without permission, gloated about it, called it teaching me a lesson, and now you want me to help you? Yeah, that's going to be a hard no. The moment Karen realized she had no allies left, her entire body sagged. The crowd of neighbors, the city officials, the utility workers, no one was on her side. And then came the final nail in her coffin. One of the utility workers stepped forward. By the way, Karen, that whole HOA authority excuse you used to tamper with the system, well, we did a little digging. Turns out you were never even officially elected as the HOA president. The last vote didn't actually count. So, not only did you break the law, but you did it without any actual power. Karen's mouth dropped open in pure shock. That's impossible. I've been running this HOA for years. The worker shrugged. Yeah, well, the paperwork doesn't lie. Looks like the real HOA board is calling an emergency meeting to vote you out. Permanently. And just like that, whatever tiny sliver of power Karen thought she had left evaporated. She let out a strangled sound somewhere between a sob and a scream and stomped away from the scene, leaving behind a trail of muddy, soaked footprints as she tried to salvage what little dignity she had left. I watched her go, then turned back to the city officials, grinning. So, when can I expect my water to be back on? The official chuckled. Oh, don't worry. We'll take care of that right now. We wouldn't want you dealing with the consequences of someone else's stupidity. Less than an hour later, my faucets were running again, my sprinklers were back on, and my life had returned to normal. Karen, on the other hand, well, let's just say the next time I saw her, she was packing up a moving truck. So, where are you off to? I asked casually as I watered my lawn, just to rub it in one last time. Karen glared at me, her face still twisted with bitterness, before shoving the last box into her car. Hope you're happy. I grinned. Oh, I really, really am. And with that, she sped off, leaving behind the neighborhood she had once terrorized. As I turned off my hose, one of my neighbors clapped me on the back. "Man, that was satisfying to watch. You took down the worst HOA Karen we've ever had." I chuckled. "Nah, she took down herself. I just enjoyed the show." And with that, peace finally returned to the neighborhood.